I'm filming this at like 2 a.m. This is a little more improvisational than a lot of the stuff on this channel, but that's because if I wrote down how I felt about this and then read it off a script, I would quit Yu-Gi-Oh! So as you can probably tell by the title of this video, this is going to be a big, long-winded, third adjective, hypocritical, rantsona type piece of content. I'm going to do some of these. Yeah? Just doing it for you. Yeah? It's also kind of weird because, like, not only do I make a living off of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And making videos about it, but I've also consistently gotten in front of people who say that it sucks now and that it used to be epic. Anyway, here's my video about how Yu-Gi-Oh! Sucks now and it used to be epic. So just a quick aside, if you're unfamiliar with me, first off, that means the video is appearing in your recommended box, and I am not just talking to the same 40 or 50,000 people that I usually spew my little diatribes at. That's good, I guess. And second is, I'm in kind of a unique Yu-Gi-Oh! Position. I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Since the very start. I'm always looking for new ways to enjoy the game. I will play literally any format, historic or fan or things like Speed Duel or Rush Duel. And I've also played literally every format in Yu-Gi-Oh!'s history in some capacity. Now that the show that I'm a part of, History of Yu-Gi-Oh!, has reached the point at which I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty competitively. So I can say with at least a little bit of authority that this format is not good. Not good for reasons that aren't just like temporal, but reveal a sort of like frog in the pot shift about how we play the game that has resulted in a format that's just sort of perpetually in crisis. At the 250th YCS in London, I showed up playing a deck that wasn't particularly competitive, but I liked and did way better than I thought I would. And I thought, okay, this is going to light a fire under me. I can't wait to actually get good enough at the game that I can start topping YCSs. I'm going to put in the hours, and I sat down to play Kashtira for YCS Philly, and I really dissipated within a matter of days. That's like an awful place to be in, right? When people whose job it is to play this game for a living don't want to play the game anymore. Anyway, let's talk about why. First, the meta. It sucks. Yes, the metagame is diverse in a sense. One of probably like 10 different decks could probably win you a national or an equivalent tournament. But when you look at overall play rate percentages, it is clear Kashtira is really the only game in town. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players have like a worm in their brain that tells them you need to be quantifying Tier 0 formats, classifying them only if a deck gets 65% representation at top cuts. But there have been a lot of high-level tournaments recently where Kashtira has fulfilled that condition. I personally think that describing formats in that way isn't particularly helpful, and a true Tier 0 format is one in which you are absolutely deck building for one deck in particular and nothing else. I don't think we're there with Cash. But I do think that Kashtira is a fucking miserable deck to be occupying the top spot. Yes, the deck has this like 1 in 1,000 chance to lock 9 of your zones, but more important than all of that is their main boss monster, Arise Heart. He's a big macro cosmos, which turns off like 60% of all Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards ever printed. He also creates these really frustrating game states to keep track of, where every time anyone activates anything, you have to do this little side quest where you attach a card from the Banished Zone to Arise Heart as Chainlink 1 because it's a mandatory ability. It's like a flu-style gameplay where you're building a chain constantly. And the card is super over-centralizing. Decks absolutely have to have a game plan that beats exactly Arise Heart, or they will be losing to exactly Arise Heart. In my opinion, the most frustrating part about Arise Heart is that the cards that beat it, which is largely stuff like Kurikaras and Kaijus, beat it into the fucking sun. It's at this weird nexus of card that's so individually powerful that the entire format has to warp around it, and card with so little protection that as soon as the format warps around it, games are just going to be decided on if you drew the out or not. Which brings me to skill expression in current Yu-Gi-Oh! So as a bit of background, Alex and I have been playing a lot of 2017 format for History of Yu-Gi-Oh! This year of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was largely dominated by exactly Zodiac. In the first couple of months, it really has no peer. Zodiac Pure is an incredibly powerful deck, and the mirror is pretty involved. There's some other decks that are popular and powerful around that time as well. Paleozoic, both 60 card and 40 card variants. Metal Foes Zoo, which can be both a combo deck and a sort of deck with inevitability, which decks like Zoo largely lacked. Invoked Artifact Wind Witch, and a significant amount of decks that are playing Zoo, but also supplementing it with other engines. Things like Infernoid Zoo are very popular. Anyway, without spoiling too much about the next couple of episodes of the History of Yu-Gi-Oh!, there is so much going on in these games. We have like double-digit games in the next 2 or 3 weeks that go to turn 15, and we are both in it the entire time. Now, I want you to sit down and ask yourself, when was the last time something like that happened to you? I've been testing my ass off for this format, and I can count on one hand the number of games that I've played that have gone to like turn 5. For the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a weird arms race in Yu-Gi-Oh! Individual cards do so much they often represent an end board on their own. Think Kashtira Unicorn, for instance. So as a result, the cards that beat those cards have to be unbelievably powerful in order to counteract something that strong. which means that in turn, end boards have to become more and more comprehensive, necessitating even more comprehensive answers, necessitating even more powerful end boards. We've gotten to a point in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where the cards that beat certain strategies are unbelievable. Kurikara, Nibiru, Droll, Shifter, Kaiju's, Dimensional Barrier. Functionally, all of these cards read win the game, and their activation conditions for the most part can't be played around. Sure, like you can not Shangri-Ira, but you're still losing a Rise Heart off of a Kurikara when the mandatory effect triggers. As a result, getting good at a format often has very little to do with actual gameplay and everything to do with reading your opponent, peering into their soul, determining if they have a blowout, and then deciding if it's one of those blowouts you can play around or one of those blowouts you can't. That is a skill for sure, but I'd much rather cultivate something like in-game decision-making than staring. Ooh, I can tell by the way he scratched his nose. He's holding a Nibiru. Like, that sucks. That's just poker shit. That sucks. Which brings me to card design. I've started to kind of dread games 2 and 3 now. More often than not, they feel like they're decided by lingering floodgate bullshit you can't plan around. If I'm on Super Heavy Samurai, I can guarantee Droll is going to make an appearance. If I'm on Pearly, I know the Shifter's coming, and I better have drawn Gamma, or that's it. These lingering floodgate hand traps and these big fucking blowouts often make the game feel like Go Fish. Got any Kurikara? Go Fish, Mr. Fox. Got any Droll? Not a one, sir. Go Fish. I sat down to try to figure out when it felt like Yu-Gi-Oh! Shifted from what it was to what it is now, and I think it must have been around 2018 when people were playing that Goki U-Link deck. If you're unfamiliar, that list summoned a billion monsters and then ended on Topologic Gumblar Dragon, taking 4 cards out of your hand. To beat that deck, you had to draw the out. And if you drew the out and retained the out after the Gumblar, you won the game. If you did not, you lost. And while that deck was completely unfair and did get hit pretty quickly, I couldn't help but think how many formats since follow the exact same gameplay loop. A first turn where your opponent sets up, a subsequent turn where you reveal if you have drawn the out or not, and then a scoop from the opponent if they didn't draw the out for your out. This isn't just combo decks either. Even slow decks like Sky Striker can get off to an insurmountable advantage unless you draw the out, post board something like an anti-spell fragrance, and then they have to draw the out for your out, a Mystical Space Typhoon or something. It just sucks. It takes a game that's well known for being a vehicle for storytelling and condenses the whole thing down into a turn and a half. Just going through some of the top decks, with Kashtira, frequently the game feels like it boils down to if your opponent can't out your big Macrocosmos, you've deaded 90% of the cards in their deck and you win instantly. If they've drawn the out, then you lose instantly. Super Heavy Samurai often feels like a race to a lingering floodgate hand trap, either something like Shifter or something like Droll and Lockbird, the absence of which is your opponent failing to draw the out for your big board that absolutely kills them. Pearly is a deck that often feels like it wins or loses based on the back if your opponent has opened a Kaiju. This one isn't as bad because they have built in archetype ways that you can recoup some of the losses and mechanisms by which you don't actually die on the spot. MathMech's power is almost entirely concentrated in Super Factorial. If your opponent can push through it, they win. If they can't, you do. Branded is just Gimmick Puppet at this point. This is a massive oversimplification, of course. In Kashtira, for instance, there's a lot of games that reduce down to Fenrir control, and those are interesting and do have a lot of back and forth, but they are far and away the minority. My experience is that a significant amount of Kashtira games are determined by playing Go Fish.
What a fun game this is.
Which brings me to something I think would alleviate a lot of the problems with this type of card design, which is communication. Where ban list? Okay, but really, where ban list? I think I could forgive a significant amount of this if Konami was discussing with the player base ever what their design goals are, what they want Yu-Gi-Oh! To be, how they expect the format to shake out, what cool stuff you can do in upcoming sets. Right now, it feels like the only communication the wider player base has with Konami is that Konami contacted some content creators to make videos explaining how to get to Worlds through Master Duel, 3/4 of the way through the Master Duel event in which you could get to Worlds. They're not talking to us about goals for the format. They're not talking to us about what the future of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to look like. They're not even fucking giving us ban list dates. Like, it's unbelievable that it says a few months from now, right? I feel like I'm going crazy. I want more than anything to hear discussion from card designers about the cards they're designing. Like a Rise Heart, for instance. Is it being intentionally made the way it is? Is this gameplay loop what Konami wants? Can we expect this for the future of Yu-Gi-Oh? Is this an anomaly? What's the plan? I really can't stress this enough coming from a Magic the Gathering background. The fact that we have no insight as to what the developers of Yu-Gi-Oh want is unbelievable. It is not common to hear radio silence from a company whose bottom line depends on the goodwill of the player base. It's weird. Which brings me to, What's going to happen? Nothing. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to continue to be run in this way until it inevitably collapses in the year 2090 when cardboard becomes more precious than water. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players will put up with anything, at least in part because of creators like me who, when faced with criticism, will get out in front of it to defend the card game they love. And I don't see a way out for us either. I think if Yu-Gi-Oh! Starts losing money, Konami isn't going to restructure how the game is designed, they're going to can it. But in a best of all possible worlds, here's how it could be fixed. Print better cards. I think the cat's out of the bag when it comes to answers. When you can look at a card like Dark Ruler No More and decide that it is not the right fit for a current format, something's gone miserably wrong. Honestly, I know I'm going to get shit for this, but this is why I liked Tier. There are a significant amount of cards that you would expect against Tier to just read Win the Game, Dimension Shifter, and the like, and they just didn't. Tier was more than capable of normal summoning one Tier Limit monster, setting a Celiac and a Crime and passing, or making a Baguska and waiting out the Shifter activation. It was a deck that, theoretically, could answer anything with Engine. And as a result, games very infrequently ended with one player making some amazing board that couldn't be outed under any circumstances, and the other opening the out and instantly winning the game on the spot. It sucks that it was a Tier 0 format. I understand that. I think the solution is to print more archetypes that are as good as Tier Element, instead of reducing the game back down to Go Fish. Anyway, it's like 2:30 a.m. now, so I'm going to wrap this up. I should note, I don't feel burnt out at all. I still love playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I have a ton of fun making the 10-minute testings, the Twitter threads, which are basically just a vehicle to reminisce about the good times we've all had playing this game, and the jank banks in which you all show me what you're excited about playing. I just can't muster the same type of excitement about the TCG right now. And that sucks because it's basically the only way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! For now. That's right, this whole thing was a promo for the Rotation series coming soon! That's it. Bye-bye.